Thank you all for coming. My name is Venk Shukla, and I'm president of TIE. And how many people here come to TIE for the first time? Okay, quite a lot actually. 15, 20 people. Okay. I think what that means is that I should give a spiel on TIE. For the benefit of those who are coming here for the first time, and the rest of you, please bear with me. So TIE was started about 21 years ago, and it was started by 5 or 6 entrepreneurs who were successful beyond their wildest dreams, and they wanted to figure out how to give back to the society. And after 6 months and months of brainstorming, finally they hit upon a recipe. And the recipe was to create an organization that promotes wealth creation through entrepreneurship. That was the mission of the organization. And they hit upon a recipe that has proved to be a very potent recipe. They made it a very, very exclusive club. It was aspirational to join that club. But it was not a club just for getting together or for snobbery. The club was that as a condition of joining the club, you have to commit to giving what is most valuable to successful people, which is their time. And the idea was that, first of all, you have to be invited. You can't just join this thing. So you have to be invited to be a charter member of TIE. And if you want to become a charter member of TIE, you have to commit to spending your time for the benefit of the next generation of entrepreneurs. And that recipe turned out to be a very potent recipe. And that recipe also traveled very well. Now, TIE exists in 60 different chapters in 17 different countries. So that idea of combining highly successful people and getting them committed to spending their time for the benefit of next generation of entrepreneurs is the key to success of this organization. This goes from strength to strength. We have been around for 21 years, and most of the people you see who are involved in TIE are volunteers. I'm a volunteer, and can I get all the charter members here to raise their hands, please? So there are a pretty significant number of charter members here, and all these guys, essentially volunteer their time for the benefit of entrepreneurship. So TIE, initially it used to focus on 3-4 things, which is inspiring people to become entrepreneurs, educate them on how to go about doing that, and mentoring them. Over time, the emphasis has evolved. We do not only those things, but we also started a couple of programs. One is to fund the entrepreneurs through a program called TIE Angels. So we have funded, in the last 2.5 years, we have funded 20 companies, and with a total investment of about $7 million. So if you know of anyone looking for funding, please point them in the direction of TIE Angels. The other thing that we do, we are about to do, is launch an incubator accelerator to focus on B2B companies. We'll keep them, in the startup space, beyond this partition. If you have not looked at it, please go check it out. We'll give them $50,000 to each company, and have a curriculum that is optimized towards customer development, which is validating the product, finding early customers and stuff. And another thing that we'll do, something which no one else in the world can replicate, which is to assign a mentor, a deep domain expert, to work with that company for a period of 6 months and that person has to commit to spending 1 to 2 hours every week with that company, helping them think through their approaches, strategy, product direction, as well as open up their Rolodex for the benefit of the company. And these are some of the most successful people in the valley. And the company gets to choose who becomes their mentor. So this is something which is very unique, and this is something which is good for entrepreneurs. This is good for investors in this fund. It's called TIE Launchpad. It's good for TIE. If you want to talk anything more about it, if you know some company who's looking to could take advantage of it, I'd like to introduce one of our board members and the managing director of Launchpad Fund, Prashant. Prashant, can you please stand, please? So Prashant used to be general partner at Hammer Winblad. He was with them for 10 years, and now he would be running the TIE Launchpad program. So please get in touch if you want to talk to him. Thanks, Prashant.
Prashant at TIE.org if you want to know.
Very well. So that's another significant activity. We also have a program called TIE CEO Forum, which is like peer support group for first-time CEOs. This is the kind of thing that you can't get help from. You're lonely at the top. You can't get help from anybody else. So you go to a peer support group which meets once a month, and it's like Alcoholic Anonymous for CEOs. So that's another good program. We are also launching another program called TIE CIO Forum, where companies in the TIE ecosystem will get an opportunity to present to the 30 CIOs of the biggest companies in the United States. CIOs of companies like Walmart, Costco, New York Life, and Nike, Hospital Corporation of America, and so on and so forth. So, and that again is a benefit is given to companies that are either funded by TIE Angels or who are in the Launchpad program, or one of the charter members has either started that company or invested in that company. So all those kind of benefits is here available. So very, very exciting things we do for the benefit of entrepreneurs. And how many of you are members of TIE? Okay. So there's significant number who are not members of TIE yet. So so let me give you a pitch on why you should be a member. First of all, it costs only $150. There are about 40 or 50 such events that take place a year, and the food is free for all of those events. So you do your math. Plus you get a significant discount in the annual TIECon. So if you're not a member of TIE, this is an opportunity to become a member immediately. Raj, what's the process of becoming a member? Can they sign up today?
Go online, sign up, become a member, and you get automatic acknowledgement for it not is acceptable.
Okay.
It's all online.
And so it's for the membership for rolling 12-month period.
Rolling 12 months. It's
Okay.
not calendar year. The day you join, it expires the day before you join. A
Great.
year from now.
Great. Great. Thank you. So finally, see about this event. I mentioned that TIE does programs to inspire, to mentor, to educate, and to fund. This is the program that we are doing today is in the category of education, and we have a very dynamic board member who organizes these special interest groups focused on the hottest areas of innovation. And ever since he has joined the TIE board, the quality of our programs is quality, and the quantity has improved dramatically. So let me welcome Naveen Bish.
Thank you, Wayne. So Wayne forgot to mention that TIE. He is the president of TIE, which from our perspective we call it the chief volunteer officer, chief volunteer. And also he gets paid 7-digit salaries. The only thing was his name was missed out in the San Jose Mercury News over the weekend. So that 7 digits, only thing is there is no 1 in the front, it's all zeros. So let's give him a big round of applause. So before we get excited, we have a highly accomplished panel, experts in the storage industry. Even we have folks like, when you remember, you used to get 1 gigabyte storage in almost like a big box. I mean, experts. And to the pioneers like Urshid who were trying to send everything to the cloud. And now Urshid is, he was founder of Store Simple, I'm sure. Tom will let them talk about their background. But right now he is with Mayfield Fund as a partner. He just joined recently. How many of you are looking for money? Not that many. Come on. So make sure you don't let him get away from here. Once they get away, they never come back. So today, before he goes away, get his checkbook out. So anyway, so with that, what I would like to do is, as you mentioned, we are an organization for fostering entrepreneurship. One lesson I learned from my mentors as an entrepreneur was the key criteria for an entrepreneur to be successful is to build a team where everyone is much smarter than you are. Meaning in my case, I always try to find A+ team members. So here I was very fortunate to have 2 co-chairs for SIG, this industry segment, which we called, actually we coined it this year before TiCon, called Software Defined Infrastructure, which is, as you know, there has been a lot of innovation in the compute area. VMware is kind of the de facto leader, and of course Red Hat, I'm sorry. Ranga is here. He might not come for any more panels in future. Thank you, Ranga. I didn't mean that way. So, storage and networking. So we felt that we can have SDI focus on storage and networking because those are 2 areas where lots of innovation is still going on. In fact, on September 10th, we have co-founder, CTO of Nicera. He'll be featured here as the My Story speaker, Martin Casado, which is one of the companies VMware bought last year, doing a lot of pioneering work in software-defined networking. So, so SDI will focus on storage and networking. So for that, we have 2 co-chairs. One is Atul. Atul has been, could you please stand up so everyone can see your handsome face? So Atul has been, a serial entrepreneur, co-founder of a company called Proactive Networks, which was bought by BMC Software, and most recently he was vice president over there, and now he's on to his another startup. And earlier, in fact, he was involved in the early initiatives of HP OpenView when he worked over there. So he's one of our co-chairs who has been putting a lot of work into getting all these great panels over here. And another co-chair who could not be here today is Kanaya Vasani. He's a vice president of Port Dev at Juniper Networks. So as you can see, we have a great team of these co-chairs, and they're all volunteers. And so they've been able to get these highly accomplished folks over here. So let's give a big round of applause to all the volunteers who helped Ty. And before that, I wanted to mention Raj is sitting there quietly over there, who got all these wine bottles from his cellar for us. Raj is the executive director, and with a small team of 4 or 5 folks, that's all. That's what the Thai background of Thai organization over here. So let's give them a big round of applause. Okay, with that, I would like to hand it over to Tom. Thank you, Tom.
Good evening. Good evening. How are you? So my name is Tom Trainer. I have been in the storage industry since I think somebody was talking about megabyte drives, right? Actually, with a big IBM storage kind of background. And then moving into AS400s, and then open storage, open systems, distributed computing, and then open source with Gluster. I worked with Gluster for about a year, and we were eventually purchased by Red Hat. We became Red Hat storage. So, and after that, I've moved on to other things. Today, I'm an independent analyst working in the industry. You can find me at networkcomputing.com. I write articles for them and for Information Week as well. So if you go to Network Computing, just search for me. They're putting a new website up, new homepage, so I'll be on that soon. Today, we have a great panel with us. We have great industry experts, guys who know and understand storage. How many of you are involved with storage today? Good. All right, great. So we've got the right audience in front of us, and that's a good thing. So, as we move forward in our session today, we'll talk about our panel of experts. We'll introduce them. We'll all have a chance to speak and tell you about what they do and their perspectives on software-defined infrastructure and how storage fits into that, right? And that's a good thing. I'll talk a little bit, just for a couple slides for me, and we'll get into the meat of the content and the realization for customers what software-defined infrastructure means from a storage perspective. This is a real live customer in the Bay Area in Concord who uses software-defined infrastructure and storage. And that storage does fit within a software-defined infrastructure. Okay? Very well. And then we'll give our perspectives, of storage. Then we'll have some questions for the panel, and then we'll open it up for questions from you all. Okay? Is that fair? Good? Okay. So with us today, we went through the announcements of who's with us, but we do have Mayfield. We have Jay Kistler, the co-founder and CTO and VP of Engineering at Magnetics. Ethan Brown from Dell. He's involved very heavily with data protection, so he can talk to you very clearly about Dell's perspective on data protection. Jaspreet Singh, co-founder and CEO of Druva, another data protection perspective all the way out the endpoint, right? So from in the data center all the way out at the endpoint, we have representatives today. And then Ranga Rangachari from Red Hat Storage, and he'll give you a perspective on open source storage and the value proposition therein. It's very exciting, very hot in the market today. So this is what a customer says about a software-defined infrastructure and how they see it and how they're able to do automated changes very quickly. The old way that they used to do it with hardware, storage hardware, is antiquated and will put them out of business. They can't do it today. And they need flexibility in the data center or private cloud and in a public cloud. They need to be able to deploy storage very quickly, right, for rapidly changing application environments. So this is how they see it. And the definition of software-defined infrastructure, for a customer, really doesn't matter, right? I mean, they want solutions. They want applications that drive storage solutions. All the marketing buzz and all the industry analysts who come up and say, yeah, we're going to define the market, we're going to value the market. Yeah, it's going to be billions of dollars, right? It's all billions of dollars, billions and billions over the next 5 years. And it will be. So it's still being defined, as you know, right? But it includes quite a bit, right? It includes public clouds, private clouds, data centers, software, storage management, data management, the whole thing. And storage fits within SDI, right? We know it does. And certainly as traditional hardware, but more seamlessly as software. When you look at software and what you're able to do today in creating storage, it's just incredible, right? So if you have ideas on innovation for storage and data management, it has to be in software. That's where the real value is, right? It's easy, it's flexible, it's easily deployable in the data center or private cloud and in public cloud. So innovate there. That's where customers need it. So we do need to do a better job in educating, right? So tonight is a good example of that. But if you're talking with users, you need to educate them on what you're doing or what you have innovation ideas for and get their feedback, right? Talk to the people who actually do it and get their feedback. So let's have our panelists come up, speak one at a time, give them 5 to 10 minutes to talk to you about what they're doing, and then we'll come around for some questions. Jay?
Thanks, Tom. Thank Atul and the team for including me in the panel. It's a pleasure to be here. This is actually my first Thai event. I am a first-time entrepreneur at Magnetics. I'm not of Indian origin, but my partner, Amarjeet Gill, is. He's a multi-time serial entrepreneur. He actually refers to himself as the Punjabi cowboy. So I feel this is a community that I know well, and I've been privileged actually to learn a lot from it through Amarjeet and other people in his circle. So I really am pleased to be here. Did I go backwards? Yeah, okay. So let me start off by saying that I see software-defined infrastructure much more as a means to a goal than an end goal in itself. In fact, I would say something maybe a little controversial that I don't think our customers anyway, enterprise IT, really care about SDI as a concept. I don't know that they're as cynical as the Wikipedia editor who leads with this in the Wikipedia page for software-defined storage, but I really don't think it's at the top as a concept, the top of the list for a lot of IT folks. However, customers do care very much about many things that SDI enables, right? Things from fast provisioning, the concept of agility to elasticity, being able to scale up and down, vendor independence, and maybe most of all, low total cost of ownership. Right? And we firmly believe that SDI is a driver for all of these things. So the way we prefer to look at it is that the end is not SDI really, but what people talk about as IT as a service, right? This is the concept that an internal IT can offer and provision for internal customers services as easily and as efficiently as those internal customers could get from external providers, right? And in some cases, internal IT might just be kind of a pass-through to services from outside. In other cases, they may be operating them internally, but easy to provision, very seamless, that kind of thing. So in the storage space, it's things like a VMDK storage as a service, a database as a service, or in our case, file systems as a service, conventional shared file access. And so we believe that's really the goal, and not SDI per se. So let me just take up one more slide here, just kind of a quick example of one of the things that we do, example of this notion of being able to rapidly deploy storage services. A good example of a shared file systems as a service. This is something that today IT can do using only software and generic commodity hardware provided by others. Apologies if it seems a little self-serving. This is one of the things that my company does, but you talk about the things that you know. So the kind of one-time setup for this is to provision a set of management VMs on a conventional virtualization platform, the public or private, doesn't matter. And agent software on endpoint devices that's going to communicate and provide user access to the shared storage. And the endpoints, in our case, can range from anything from conventional PCs to servers to laptops, even to smartphones and tablets and other embedded devices. Okay, so the part that is added as new capacity is provisioned is what we call virtual filer, which exports the abstraction of a share and traditional file semantics to the end user devices. That consists again of some VMs that are provisioned on the virtualization platform, along with object storage that the customer chooses, maybe any of the popular public or private object stores, doesn't matter. And then So then the users consume the storage via the agents on the endpoint, which communicate separately over the control and data planes with the corresponding parts of the storage system. So there you have it, software defined, no special hardware, takes minutes to do. Okay.
Jay, thanks very much. Really good things you're doing at your company. Certainly innovating for storage and services as well. So next on our panel is Utham Rao from Dell, and of course it's about data protection too, right? So protecting data in the enterprise and throughout.
Hey guys, so I'll be completely upfront, and I'm gonna say that we're at Dell just trying to figure out what software definition for data protection means, and a lot of the things that Jay said, I agree with. It's but I just kind of want to walk you through what the motivation for software definition actually started from, and go back 10, 15 years. What we really wanted to do was not have vendor lock-in and have all this proprietary software running in the switches. And it really started with software-defined networking. And what we wanted to do was separate the control and data paths. And we said, why does all of this IP have to actually live in the router that I buy? And I gotta buy thousands of these routers and program each and every one of them, the routing tables, and it's all just proprietary. And could I just kind of separate the physics from the software? And that fundamental notion just kicked off and started saying, why can't I do that to my entire infrastructure? Why can't I just take all of the logic that's actually just software, centralize that in a generic way, kind of program that, define that, but have the physics and the hardware and the wiring. You know, I don't want to go in and configure my racks, and I don't want to go in and every time I add a new server, I don't want to go in and configure my top of rack switch, and then the end of row switch, and then the core switch. All of these things really made sense. So the question is, it's not just about software-defined storage or software-defined networking. It really is a software-defined data structure, data center. Can I take all of this logic that I'm doing with everything that I want to do with an application-centric perspective, what my application really wants to do, and then have everything else kind of be slaves? And SDN did that. Now, SDN, in my opinion, is an overblown concept. It really is just about, you know, if you just take a look at OpenFlow and things like this, you'll realize that, yeah, it's kind of a simple thing. I can do this. The hesitance has come from the vendors actually adopting to an open standard, or any standard, even a closed standard. But it's not that complicated. And the same thing is happening for storage as well. And for storage, it's a little more ill-defined because what is software-defined storage? In my opinion, it's sort of in storage actually always existed. The software definition has always been there. We had an intelligent volume manager. We added functionality like thin provisioning. A virtualized volume manager, one could argue, is software-defined storage. We could add things that make a whole bunch of disks look like a global pool of disks for storage. This is part of being a software-defined infrastructure. So my point is that software-defined networking and software-defined storage, which is, like I say over here, virtualization, they are starting to remove intelligence from the actual hardware that we buy from either Juniper or Cisco or Dell or HP or EMC, and they're just trying to take the intelligence extracted out of what you actually pay the physical dollars for and make it more commoditized and make it more software-like, that you can go in and interact with a console, program things, and it goes in and controls the infrastructure. So that's what software definition for storage means from a primary storage perspective. But I'm here to talk about data protection. So now what does this mean for data protection? Actually, I've had trouble thinking about this. And like I said, we're in the process of trying to figure out what all of this means. When I talk to all my engineers and the architects from a data protection perspective, a lot of this has always existed. We've had something called an intelligent backup application. If you look at Dell's Aperture product, for instance, we know everything that an application does. And I've listed, if somebody were to say, what does software definition mean for data protection? I would list these three things. Well, can you have an application consistent snapshot? Yes, we can do that. Can we have recovery in a P2E environment, which is physical to virtual? That is, your physical hardware fails, you want to bring it up in a virtual environment? We can do that too. Can we do data application recoverability checks, which means like in 10 years from now, can my application recover from the same send? We can do that too. But this isn't the end of the road. So what are we going to do next from a data protection perspective in software definition? My point is that this is an evolving cycle, and there are things that we're looking at, and we haven't figured all of this out. My last slide is some of the type of things that we're trying to look at. Well, what I said was software-defined networking exists, software-defined storage exists, and I also said, well, software definition kind of always existed in the data protection world because we had intelligent backup applications, right, that knew about Apple. But what does this mean in terms of next steps? From a storage-only perspective, one of the things that we're looking at Dell is trying to combine what software-defined storage means from primary storage and data protection into a unified stack. That is, I want to know about everything that the application is going to do. I want to know what an application, what an application's expiration policy means. If I send an email, do I have a 6-month expiration policy, 3-month? Where do I store it? Is something considered scratch space? Why do I want to protect scratch space data? And there's a ton of, when you do how many of you guys are engineers here? You do makes all the time. Do you want that data protected? Probably not. And you definitely don't want that protected on SSD storage. So there's an interaction with what the primary storage stack is doing with respect to what needs to live where, and what the data protection stack is doing with respect to what needs to move where and what needs to tier where. And these don't need to be two separate stacks. So one of the takeaway ideas over here, probably from an innovation perspective, is how do you unify the management of these two control planes that are trying to define what needs to be protected, what needs to be moved? And I don't have all the answers, but these are the type of things that we're looking at. We're trying to work with the storage teams to figure out what their definition of software means, or software-defined storage means, and what, from a data protection perspective, what we think about where data needs to live, what scratch space is, what the data protection policies are, and these things need to be combined. They need to be combined, extracted from the hardware, and virtualized.
Thank you. So I have a question. What about the compellent and the formidable logic folks over there? Who cares about? They're not software. They're hardware. Ooh, that's bad. I'll turn it over to Jaspreet Singh from Dhruva, and he'll talk about what they're doing and their perspective. So we're seeing some really varied perspectives here, right? Kind of get an idea where Dell is from a data perspective, the data protection perspective.
Thanks, Tom. So I have a much different take on software-defined storage, actually, much different from audience here. And as an engineer, I'm trying to start on my thoughts to tell a story here, so just bear with me. I think software-defined storage is a disruption. And like any other disruption, the press, the customer will try to negate it. They will not try to understand it. They will try to compare it to the existing logic of data protection and backup, putting more software and stuffing more intelligence in the same storage. So at Dhruva, we believe that best backup is not even a backup. And the way storage has evolved much differently than what the architectures were supposed to do. The storage evolved so far to create a sense of architectural, more robustness or faster or more compressed storage in the same box. And now when you try to build clouds, to be honest, the best data protection offered by EMC or Dell is a box. It's still a box. You start to build a cloud out of these boxes, you try to break the barriers, try to put the replication, you try to manage the infrastructure to build a more scalable solution, and then you break. And that's why you don't have a cloud from EMC or Dell. So what you really do is you fundamentally change the paradigm of storage, or what a storage should look like for the future of data protection, future of backup. And this is not completely in line with what we do, but so Dhruva, we try to build a software, a data protection for endpoint, for data beyond the data center, the data left outside by the IT organization as not the code, not the most important, but the edge data. And when we try to build the backup for data protection for these software and took a fresh approach, and being engineers earlier worked on file systems, we figured out that the best backup is not backup. You can't copy files over and over again and just call it a protected copy. The definition, the fundamental definition of what you want to protect and how do you want to recover, how fast you want to recover, the concept of snapshot has changed. The need of a data protection has changed. So Dhruva never built a backup. Dhruva built what we consider data protection and governance story. We saw multiple workloads and endpoints and try to balance them by a single unified view. And maybe just move over and not try to give a sales pitch here, but move on to other concepts. For me, the fundamentals of software-defined storage is the fundamental difference between a block and an object. So how do you differentiate them? A block is a building block of a storage, right? It's dumb. It's supposed to be a place where you go and write your data. An object is supposed to be intelligent. It's supposed to be self-healing, self-replicating, a common namespace. When you embed intelligence in the most fundamental part of the storage, you create something new. So when you build boxes and you have the same standard namespace and you try to shuffle in data, you have to replicate it. You have to manage multiple stuff to make it appear like one big unit. You can store stuff. When you create clouds, you have to talk about multiple workloads, multiple use cases, same data. So the future of data protection is defined around how to best use this data for multiple use cases. A classic example in endpoints, could be a workload different between a backup and file share. They are same to an end user, but very, very different workloads. A very active use of data for a very fast synchronization, a very passive use of data for storing and retrieving content on a long-term basis, potentially leading to an archive. But if you can now think about the data is the same, so why two different services? Why can't data protection or these two multiple workloads combine the same data, or use the same data, and fundamentally have different meta information, which could be eventually be used for multiple use cases from backup or file share or e-discovery. When you create this multi-stream data protection, you create a multiple path to break away from files, to break away from blocks, and create objects which can have a better relationship between them, which can express a relationship or express forming a unified namespace much more effectively. Then you can use this relationship or association for multiple workloads very, very effectively. Call it deduplication, call it searchability, call it file sharing, call it backup. They all become same. When you break down the use case into fundamentally different building block, they all come down to same. And the use case of storage is, there was a trend in the last 30 years where they were trying to build disks that are more reliable and more durable and more snapshot driven or consistent or coherent. But now as architecture is evolving to a more, a different use case of defining durability, reliability aspects, defining service time, guarantees around a storage, easier scale out than scale up. When you're changing the way you want to provision storage, when you use storage, and for different workloads, NAS and SAN used to be two different applications. Calendar and email used to be two different applications. Nobody wants to buy a calendar application now. When these use cases combine, you create something new. You create a new architecture which you define in a much different way, where the intelligence go in the deep core building blocks to create something completely new. And they have a different implication for different market sizes. For us, it was the fundamentally storing in the information, the meta information completely separately and leveraging it again and again for e-discovery or whatever. And for multiple use cases, they appear to be much different than a standard way of building up blocks and putting in more software to make it more intelligent. So that's kind of my take of, in my limited space of data protection, of how I see software defining the next generation of storage, not the hardware, not the box. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I like what you said about a cloud doesn't fit in a box. Does anybody here work for EMC? I wrote a blog a couple of years ago. It was kind of an anti-Atmos blog. It said cloud. It was titled "Cloud Doesn't Fit in a Box," and I actually after it published, the next morning I had an email from EMC Legal saying that network computing needed to retract the whole story, and I needed to rewrite it to say how well AT&T was doing buying fully populated Atmos boxes and portioning them out at very little storage amounts, right? So I didn't do that. We let it stand, that's still there. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ranga. And
how many of you want to see slides? You do? Awesome. Cool. Yeah, 8 o'clock. So anyways, so before I walked in here, before I left work, I'm up in Mountain View. That's where most of the storage operations for Red Hat is. I Googled software-defined storage. I think I got 15 million hits. You should check it right now. It must have gone up even more. Then I said, okay, let's try one more. I did the software-defined networking. And Rotten got 11 million hits. So, okay, let's get a little more fun with this. I did big data. 1.1 billion hits. So, I guess big data hype is a little more than software-defined or software-defined storage or software-defined networking. I'm not going to bore you with any slides. I do have a few slides here, so people want to look at it, can obviously take a look at it. But the Red Hat's, for those of you who are not familiar with Red Hat, we are an open source company, true open source. I believe in the history of software today, and there are a lot more people who are a lot more experts than I am, I think there have been pure play $10 to $15 billion software companies. and this includes guys like CA, DMC, and Oracle, and SAP, and others. Red Hat is the only billion-dollar open source software company, right? So I think what we've proven is, like our CEO likes to say, you can make money with free software, right? There's a fundamental change in the way industries are adopting storage, adopting software. So when we looked at the storage landscape, so we had an infrastructure layer more than anything else. Compute, middleware, and storage was kind of a critical piece that was missing as we looked at the advent of cloud. So we looked long and hard, either building on our own or looking at a few companies, and we acquired a company called Bluster. It was like November, October 2011. And what was really, forget the technology, obviously it was great and everything else, but what was really appealing to us was just the level of dynamic activity, the dynamic level of community involvement in software development. And that's in our DNA. So we gravitate towards more than technologies, we gravitate towards communities. There's a certain amount of vibrancy that fosters innovation. Much like the whole principle of what TIE was formed, which is together, innovation happens beyond the four walls of a company. It happens out there in the community. And let's foster this innovation and try to make IT more interesting than it is today. So our belief in storage was pretty simple. There were three pronounced trends that we saw in the marketplace that are coming, kind of bearing fruit right now. One is just the sheer explosion of unstructured data. Right? I mean, traditionally, if you go back to a data center 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was dominated by rows and columns of Oracle databases. Right? Those days are gone. 90% of all enterprise data that's going to be created is going to be unstructured. Right? Whether it's audio, video, take your pick, any type of machine, logs, all that kind of stuff. The second is just the movement to cloud. 40% of cloud spend is storage related. Right? I mean, so for entrepreneurs here in the room who are looking at new areas, tap into it. There's a huge, huge potential there. It still hasn't been, I guess, exploited as much as it needs to be. And the third is big data. All right, whether it's Hadoop or Cassandra or anything that's not SQL, we look at it as big data. But just the fundamental thing with Hadoop is very interesting is it's built on the basic principle that compute and storage have to be co-resident. Because the crunching has to happen as close to the compute as you can, as opposed to shipping data across to hot, bringing it back. You lose the power. You lose the power of what all these big data jobs can do. So if you combine all these three, that was kind of a foray into storage. All right. So our mission is pretty simple. We want to do to storage what we did to compute a decade ago, which is at that point in time the industry was dominated by, I see some familiar faces from Sun and HP and IBM. We're building these proprietary RISC chipsets with proprietary Unix on top. And Red Hat came with a very simple value prop, which is take advantage of your industry standard x86 servers. So we've kind of been on this path of software-defined whatever for over a decade now. So the utopian vision, pretty simple, is for any, it boils down to three. You move, you process, you store. Right? You use the network for moving, you store the data, storage for data, and process for the compute. If you can get to a point where all those three axes are software defined, I think it really changes the landscape. It truly changes the landscape and opens up. So I don't know where this conversation is going from a Q&A standpoint, but from a white space standpoint, I think where there is a tremendous amount of white space today is an ecosystem of ISVs who can predict when the shift is going to happen from the hardware defined to software defined and tap into it. There's just a tremendous amount of opportunity in those areas. So that's my pitch. Okay.
Is anyone in here involved in big data today? Big data, yeah. So what are some of the examples of big data environments? John Mel. Yes, right, exactly. and commercial users. You know who's one of the biggest commercial big data companies in the world today? Target. Target stores, right? If you shop at Target, you're feeding the big data machine, right? Another big, pardon? NSA, right? Cell phone calls, right? They have all of my cell phone calls, all of my calls to the EMC. But one of the big consumers is the U.S. military, right? You know that big data and Hadoop sits on aircraft carriers and guides Tomahawk cruise missiles after they leave the ship. They used to do Hadoop today to guide them after they leave the ship. That's why they're so accurate, except when the journal fills up. The journal fills up, so they're going to actually hit before they run out of journal space, right? So, but there are solutions like Red Hat Storage that doesn't have a journal, right? File system uses algorithms, so you don't ever use a journal. So thank you all for your input. So now we'll move to some direct questions from me to these guys. I've thought about these questions a couple of years, and so but so you all have mics in front of you, and you can pass them around. But I'd encourage you to actually chime in. You know, the question might be for one individual, but please chime in with your thoughts. You know. So, Ranga, you talked about various elements of storage and SDI as it pertains to Red Hat. What innovations do you see out there in your space that are, aside from Red Hat Storage, which I know very well and agree with you that it's disruptive and it's innovative and brings a whole new level of storage component to a customer. But what do you see as bringing value?
Well, so, I think the value equation can be up and down the stack, right? So, just to not necessarily club each one of these of those categories, but if you look at it purely from an infrastructure standpoint, I think this movement around OpenStack is really starting to open up a lot of doors. You got lots of not small, but little companies, startups, whether it's companies like SwitchStack, companies like Ceph, everyone is trying to create a storage subsystem or underlying storage infrastructure, software-based infrastructure for the cloud environments. Right? So that's one area. You go further up, then you get into the data management side of things, right? And there's lots of players there. And when I talk about data management, I'm not talking about things like backup and those kinds of things. This is pure data management. How do you get things like a data grid that moves data back and forth in a truly software fashion? So that's one level. In the Hadoop side of things, I think the next wave of innovation is not so much whether I can come up with a better mousetrap around Hadoop or HDFS. I think it's the layer above that. It's the analytics, it's the application to drive analytics, it's the vertical market applications, whether it's retail, a whole bunch of things. Just to, if I can just put in a plug, right? One of our companies of Red Hat Storage, you guys, not the sad thing, but the fortunate thing with storage is it's always behind the scenes. It's always behind the scenes. It's like the elevator in your building. You only worry about it when it doesn't work. Right? Otherwise, it just assumes you press the button, go up to the 7th floor, and come back down. But TurboTax, Intuit, which uses TurboTax, uses Red Hat Storage as a backup. And when I met with their director of IT, I was just blown away by the burden on the system, right? I mean, at any given point in time in August, on April 15th, when people are filing taxes, there are up to 200, 250,000 simultaneous users on the system just filing their taxes. And the service levels are so onerous, right? If I'm an end user, I go in and hit submit for my 1040 or whatever else it is, and I have to wait for more than 5 seconds. I just go to hnrblog.com and say, hey, screw this, I'm going over there. So customer retention is very, very key. So what you're going to see is, as more and more innovation happens, you're going to see around the periphery value being built at those layers as opposed to
The really good points, and I'm going to ask Yoshida a question here in a minute and let him talk to you for a little bit about how he sees the storage market and pertaining to our topic tonight, but overall. And Ranga makes a good point. Storage or software as storage or storage as software opens up a whole new world of opportunity for users and those who are particularly assigned to storage. and interfacing to application writers and providers. Because today, with storage as software, with that code that used to reside in the hardware, in the firmware, and in the chips, right? In the past on floppy disks, if some of you remember, with that software now being accessible, right, through either APIs from some folks or other avenues from others, they can now do things like homegrown solutions right on the storage platform. So that's really important from a Hadoop perspective, an analytics perspective, and for other customers in the entertainment industry, where they have to do rendering very quickly and things like that. So, Nishit, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes and ask you a question from a market perspective. How do you view the opportunity for those who have thoughts of innovation?
Can we hear me? Yeah, okay. Storage has become very fashionable now. It was a little bit before me at Mayfield. It started when I was responsible about 5 years ago. And at that time, this was before the first big $1 billion acquisition that happened with the integrated domain. Storage was a big of startups. I mean, you had seen more than a few $1 billion of venture investment in storage and become now. So virtualization has become mainstream by then, and storage had it. And because there was this interesting dichotomy that people couldn't really grasp. Even today, enterprise storage is a $50 billion a year enterprise spend with something like $25 billion on storage systems, $50 billion in software, we add service and support. Still operates at something like 60-65% on average gross margin. So it's like a $30 billion gross margin opportunity now waiting to be sort of realized. And that was the case 5 years ago, and that is still the case today. And part of it is because, in many ways, when you look at the storage market, you have to realize that nobody gets fired for buying expensive storage. People get fired for losing. So it ends up being a market where data integrity, data availability, price performance, and features are except for when there are major market transitions that happen. So great new storage companies or technologies happen whenever there is a sort of workload or an app or a market or business transition that is happening. We find ourselves to be in a really fortunate position. It's like we're now seeing a convergence of so many of these trends, which are really creating opportunities for companies to get formed out of that end. Software-defined infrastructure, software-defined storage, the data center market, that end. But if you just look at start looking at cloud and the fact that now that you have a whole range of these assets as a service providers, they need a holding class of infrastructure that traditional vendors didn't provide, and Google and Microsoft and the Amazon of the world had to build on their own, and that is where you start seeing class of products coming in. You look at distributed workforces, mobility, and having to manage data across people's mobile devices and PCs, and that kind of starts creating an opportunity. You will see smartphones taking pictures everywhere, and nobody ever wants to leave them, and that creates pretty much long-term cold storage and retention like opportunities. You end up looking at what mobility is doing, what big data is doing. And so I fundamentally come from this belief that abstract infrastructure and major transitions in business and apps and workloads is what really creates new infrastructure opportunities, and storage and storage within the data center ends up being one of those workloads, which ends up being very bad. Why does the software-defined X matter? Because at least for the past decade, pretty much most of the innovation that has happened in infrastructure has basically been in software. Many of its marketing is catching up to reality that source info was a hardware appliance, not the zero hardware. We're just relying on what commodity infrastructure ecosystem. So I think that's, so you can see that there's just a huge $30-40 billion opportunity to be disrupted with innovation now in software. We can call it sort of software-defined storage. The only other thing that I would like to add in addition to that view is that this conservative market has significantly opened up because there's just been a significant, complete dearth of real innovation that has happened from major incumbents. At Store Simple, the shape in anecdote, when I had a business plan, I thought that it'd be hard to compete in the enterprise and be focused on the mid-range market. By the time we were acquired by Microsoft, we had 100 plus enterprise customers, mainly Fortune 1000 enterprises who had gone from a first meeting to a purchase within 90 days. And since Microsoft's acquisition, the number of customers, units, sales, all of that have gone up by orders of magnitude out of that. And so this was like we gone from 0 to 100 customers in less than a year. And so it's pretty clear that if you do have these good innovative solutions, which do end up addressing new workloads or some really pressing problems that people have, then getting an insertion model into enterprise, into cloud service providers, does end up being a pretty amazing opportunity. So try to cover a lot of ground and talk about it.
Thanks, Rashid. That's really great perspective. Look, we mentioned OpenStack a few minutes ago. Is anybody involved with OpenStack here? No, yeah. So Open's involved with that environment are very important. Talk to them, talk to customers, and they're on the move, right? So those panelists who have OpenStack storage solutions or OpenStack involvement are going to benefit tremendously if they've worked with OpenStack and actually partner with them. As Ranga said, ISVs, take that big view with ISVs. That's important. If you can provide solutions for those environments, you'll make money for sure. Just maybe from an OpenStack and other perspective, from a data/storage management, do you see any standards? We talked a little bit about standards earlier. Gu mentioned them. Do you see any standards developing? Any standards bodies? How do you see that today?
I think OpenStack is picking up, but even within OpenStack, it's who defines it. There are multiple stacks. There's a Red Hat stack, there's a Ubuntu stack, there's a community-based stacks, there's a Dell stack, right? The certain APIs, certain protocols are similar. But I think in Dell's case, it's a KVM plus a Swift environment. I'm not 100% sure what's been looking there, but in Red Hat's case, so there are multiple standards within an OpenStack environment. There's particularly right now, it's too early for a standardization. From a user's perspective, that Amazon defined the API layer very, very well. One of the biggest requests for EMC storage was also the S3 compatibility, which they had to go towards earlier this year. So there is a standardization on how you interface with certain APIs and come to storage, but within itself, it's still pretty early. It's still pretty early to even build for an organization who's not very well staffed to even build today a Swift-based cluster. It's not a slam dunk like it's for Hadoop or for any other open environment.
So you see it more of leading vendor distro or distributions from an OpenStack perspective, distributing the OpenStack framework maybe with Red Hat or KVM, right, and getting support from a recognized vendor.
No, I think this is the classic early days of a disruption when you see multiple vendors trying multiple things, and there'll be API standardization moving towards eventually a stack standardization which will evolve. Today, the OpenStack has a lot of flexibility. Sometimes act against it. You could use a vSphere or a KVM, a Ceph or a Swift or a Sony or anything to build that stack. And in a way, it's good. In a way, it's kind of counterintuitively breaks the standard. So I think it's early days of defining what the stack would look like. We went ahead a few months before this to sort of announce an OpenStack compatibility release. That actually was one of the customers, but then it became tough to go from one environment to another environment in the same stack. The amount of engineering involved in the same is to manage in multiple cases was too difficult. So it's still early days, but I'm hopeful that's how any disruption happens and it will sort of standardize or stabilize a few months or a few years from now.
So there is some standardization that is beginning to occur. So if you look at the consumer-facing storage services based on OpenStack, as just Pete says, that there is not a very clear API and different people are different because it's not just the API to access your data, it's the authentication, backup, billing. There's a whole bunch of these other variables that's going to come in. On the back end, we have a portfolio company. It's called SwiftStack, and that is definitely becoming the de facto standard if somebody wants to convert these OpenStack to essentially with large-scale storage.
Yeah, I mentioned them in a recent blog. SwiftStack.
Yeah. And so, and so, in these things, like with all these sort of markets, right? If you do end up getting the large early deployments and the lighthouse accounts and the lighthouse wins, then it does become much easier for you to kind of go and accelerate and scale up. What's happening real?
That's very good. Yeah, SwiftStack, what I understand is their forte is being able to deliver data without the need for web servers, just streaming objects as content directly to a user environment. Maybe that's Netflix, maybe that's something else, not necessarily a consumer, but an end user kind of an end environment.
Yes, they've written a book on software-defined storage, and a lot of what, in terms of what they've been looking at it is, so you can probably go to the website and download it, but there's this whole notion of how you're separating out the control plane, sort of in their case, how that centralized control plane then significantly provides you all the benefits that you're looking for with regards to elasticity, provisioning, integrity protection, policy, all that stuff like that. And it is really going from that, the technology of the so what of that. And I think that's a problem with the patches that's there, but I think that's good to check.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Jay, let's talk a little bit about cloud, right? So you're familiar with cloud, you have a good cloud background. So it seems to me like Amazon and maybe GoGrid and Nimbly Cloud and a few others have used software to their best advantage, right? If you go to an Amazon region and look at their zones, very software controlled, right? Storage failures are recognized, unless they go down, unless the zone goes down like over the weekend or last year, right? But by and large, they do a pretty good job with software automation, right? And detecting failures and taking things offline, and nobody really sees it, right? So they have built some kind of a software-defined infrastructure for some time. Do you see that kind of innovation moving into the data center, into the private cloud quickly, or and who do you see that's bringing that to the private cloud?
So I would definitely echo that the public providers have been the pioneers, right? And Amazon in particular, I think, has to be singled out. Who would have thought 15, even 10 years ago that Amazon would be the technical leader in utility computing, right? That powers hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of businesses now, and is at a scale beyond probably all others. I mean, whenever I step back and think of that, it just kind of blows my mind what they've done. And, big tip of the hat to Warner Vocals and the other people there for having a vision and the courage to do that. So everybody's chasing Amazon. In the public sphere, Google, Microsoft, Rackspace, all those guys are chasing Amazon. And a lot of it, Amazon's advantage comes from the fact that 5 to 8 years ago, they implemented these software-driven models, virtualization, the compute side, the networking side. They've got now many years head start really on the other players as far as the automation and the operations. So everybody's chasing it. There's a lot of players with massive resources in Chase, so that makes it really interesting. And you don't want to ever count out a Google or Microsoft or any of these other guys. But the public side is really led. On the private side, now we're seeing, of course, tremendous interest and activity with OpenStack really having rapid momentum there, and another hat tip, I would say, to Rackspace for having the vision to and willingness to kind of seed that community and continue to support it. I do think it is, a fair bit behind in terms of the maturity. It's on a different growth and path as far as maturation goes. But there's, and I would say companies like SwiftStack and Lorantis and other companies that are out there now that specialize in implementation, consulting, hardening of OpenStack and many components that are coming out there. They're doing a great job. It'll be interesting to see over the next few years how much of the gap they're able to close versus Amazon. We never discount the power of the open source community and kind of that many brains coming from different places to do good things. So we've hedged our bets. We support, if you remember from my diagram, we try to support all of the credible public and all the credible private object stores in that layer. So public side, of course, Amazon, also Google, Microsoft, and several derivatives they're built on top of OpenStack and almost that kind of thing on the private private side, the many flavors of OpenStack, but also other providers out there like Nimbly, Fashion. There's a lot of interesting players out there in the object store space. So OpenStack has the momentum that's not
That makes sense. One more point on that, so good mention, but what happens is, if you look at Amazon and giving our own example, since when we have moved from a physical infra to AWS, we've actually had more failures on a counted basis. What happens is still use AWS. The reason is that you give up one attribute, which is durability, or in certain words, reliability of one particular hardware aspect in favor of a larger scale. So even though you have, on a counted basis, a little bit more failures in Amazon and what you're facing with the weekends and stuff, but you have to define your software or re-engineer your software around it. So till the point you redefine your software around those, the way you would, the difference between an object and a block, and how available they are, and the way you define the software around it, you can still meet those durability, reliability guarantees, and still hit the scale which you wouldn't hit with a traditional architecture. It's a new way of doing things. There'll be some give and take, but in the point you can design around it, it's a win-win. Right. That's good. That's good. Good. You thought you were going to get away without a question. One thing I have to tell you though is I like your shoes. I know they don't make them anymore, right? They still make them? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I was a real funny one. Yeah, that's probably not my style, but I do like them. They'd be great on the beach. So I'm going to head back to Southern California tomorrow morning, so maybe I'll pick up a pair. Yeah, go long beach or something. So you talked about data protection, right? And that's paramount, right? I mean, all the way in the data center, well, from the creation of data, like an insurance company, right? As that's created and the data goes through its life cycle, it's paramount. It's primary number one, and then it finally gets archived, right? So what new techniques are you seeing? I mean, you're doing some new techniques and new things at Dell, and I think we talked earlier, you're seeing Dell move into data protection techniques in the stack on the software side, right? So you're doing that, maybe a little bit about that, and who else do you see kind of in the rearview mirror, or maybe in front of you, right, in the landscape, also doing that kind of thing?
Well, obviously companies that we talked about like Amazon and people like this are definitely always in the rear view stack. And just a little bit of a segue here, it's hard to put, and we talked about Amazon in the same context of talking about Microsoft and Google, and I get that, but it's hard to put Dell in that context because, well, one of the things you guys have to realize is the reason Amazon can do what it does, especially when it comes to their storage platform, and they can keep the cost down to such a mathematically incredibly unaccomplishable level, is they have all the storage and compute anyway. I mean, they just have it for all of the infrastructure. And they realize that they have peak periods and lulls, and it's not like Dell has all this compute lying around. And so for us to enter that and just say we're going to help move all of our companies to cloud, at the same price point, I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch, not just from a technology perspective, just from doing the math. If you were just to sit down and do the math, it becomes hard. But that said, we want to try and bring that level of flexibility to the enterprise, and we want to unify that. And what I talked about from a unification perspective is, look, we're completely committed to the software-defined data center initiative, software-defined infrastructure initiative. We are already, through Force 10, virtualizing and removing the control plane and from the fabric and moving it back into software. And now what we're looking at, to answer your question, is how does this play a role with the other pieces that we want to remove? And what we don't want to do is go to a customer with, look, so why are customers going to a software-defined infrastructure? They want to simplify their lives. They don't want to go and reconfigure top-of-rack switches, end-of-row switches. They don't want to keep going to the... But now if you take that and turn it into 4 other pieces of software that they have to go in and keep coordinating, have you really done any good? And the question is, can you do that in a unified way And I'm not saying this, but by the way, I'm totally not wearing the Dell badge right now. I'm not saying that this is on, I'm saying that this is an opportunity for innovation where if you could do this in a generic way and try and combine the entire data center experience in configuring all the way from networking to storage to data protection in a single console and perhaps in a virtualized environment, I think there's big opportunity there. I also think it's a big hill to climb because you're going to be faced with roadblocks from, by the way, number one roadblock, Cisco. Probably Dell. Right? We're just going to throw everything at you to try and stop you and try and bring you down to it. It has to be custom. It has to. But if you can figure out a generic way to make the, put yourselves in an IT administrator's shoes at the end of the day, not in a Dell's exec shoes or a Cisco exec shoes. Or, no offense to anybody here, but you got to put yourself in an IT administrator's shoes and say, what makes my life difficult? And it's going in and writing custom scripts for a Cisco switch or a Dell storage for EqualLogic or Compellent, or if you could just say, this is what I want done. And by the way, you got to do that from an application perspective. This is what the application wants done. It needs network burst here, storage burst there. This table is not important to be data protected. You can move this to cloud. You can, if you could somehow generically do that, that would be great. And you got to do this in a very, very easy way. Hopefully, that's where Dell is moving, what we're pushing toward. And it's but you know what? As you guys are entrepreneurs starting this from scratch, you don't have the red tape to cut through. So I don't know if that completely answers
No,
your
that's
question.
good. Yeah, that's good. I think Lou makes a really good point. You know, if you're thinking about innovation, think about what RightScale did for the public cloud. Right? RightScale merged and built kind of a single pane of glass for you if you're a cloud user, and you want the economies of scale of maybe multi-clouds. They integrate AWS and other cloud providers, right, and GoGrid and others, and have a standard model, RightScale deployable image that allows you to deploy in whatever cloud you need, right, at any time. And so a single pane of glass for overall infrastructure management is an ideal, but certainly, you know.
Yeah, and I think the whole thing here from this push and this you know, we're going through some sort of you know, renaissance here around data center reincarnate. You know, the whole push is let the software define what it needs to be done. The entire stack down, networking, storage, server utilization, CPU utilization. Let the software define what it needs, because ultimately it's what knows what needs to be done. It knows the workflows. It knows what it's going to do right now. By the way, it knows what it's going to do 10 minutes from now. I don't want my network infrastructure or storage infrastructure to sort of learn this or guess it or, you know, be heuristic. Say, just if I could just say this is what's going to happen now and now and now, and just push that information through, and that ultimately is the most fluid infrastructure. By the way, I think VMware is one of the best companies with the Sarah acquisition. These guys know what they're doing, and of all the companies that have been a part of this space, I give them the highest credit.
Good. Branko, I'm going to ask one last question. You get the last final question for me. So we're here to talk about storage and SDI. What kind of, I mean, I know the answer to this, I think, but I'm going to ask you, and you can tell the audience, because this is significant in where you are in the industry today for storage, right? And if you compare it to 20 years ago and even 10 years ago, what is the impact on cost for a customer when we're talking about deploying, say, open source storage as software compared to deploying an EMC Isilon or an EMC, maybe Bplex, or, I mean, these things are extremely costly. So what are you saying now?
So Tom, before I answer that question, going back to just Pete's earlier point about your question on standards and how things evolve. I think one of the truisms in the business we're in is volumes drive standards and standards drive volumes. It's a crazy equation, but it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. But I think the guys who break through, you see, the danger you see is you don't want other data maps, right? Where you have all these guys saying this is the best technology and then don't. Who cares if you got people endorsing it? So that's why I think, you look at the whole x86 server market, and the ARM market is very interesting. The ARM processors, I think, really opens up a lot of opportunities for on staff. But to your question, right, might be this is a little bit hot off the press, but so we commissioned IDC to do a report on just that, which is what's the total cost of ownership over a 5-year period compared to proprietary hardware-based solutions, local software-based solutions. And the numbers are pretty telling. I don't have the report in front of me, but it's somewhere on IDC on our website. But I think over a 5-year period, the total cost, that is CapEx and OpEx included, was a 72% cost advantage with going to the software-defined approach. I think around 50 to 55% was CapEx, 22% was on OpEx. Right, and this is, the numbers are telling, right, and they did their own analysis, which, again, getting back to the Intuit use case, they saw a 16-to-1 reduction in the total cost. All right, now, so cost is one aspect. Obviously, the economic disruption is a huge advantage, especially in this economic climate. But just squeezing the last dollar out is not the answer. You've got to innovate. Right, so you kind of, it's a little bit of playing offense, playing defense at the same time. You got to innovate to play offense and continue to reduce the cost. So, if you look at it from those lens, I think a software-defined approach, at least in our view, makes perfect sense. Because intelligence absolutely continues to gravitate up to the software level.
That's dramatic. So I think Ranga says that, paraphrase you, IDC substantiated that for a third the cost of storage investment, you can get similar kinds of benefits as the big guys charge for millions of dollars of storage hardware today. That's the value, that's the power of software storage, right? Or software innovation for storage. So thank you for answering my questions. I'm going to turn it over to the audience. If you have questions, please feel free.
Great.
Hi. So I have a question for all three of you actually. I can start with you. You gave the example of Intuit having the problem of 1815. They will be setting so how does that relate to the software-defined storage area? That's a computation bursting problem, which is known as hybrid computing, hybrid cloud computing. What Cisco and other people use. You have a private cloud, they burst into the public cloud, when the computation goes up.
No, not really. It's obviously compute is one aspect of it, but I think an example more closer to home, which is something very similar, is one of the customers that Gloucester had when we acquired Gloucester was Pandora Radio. So Pandora Internet Radio had a pretty interesting dynamics, which is every song that they store has to be stored in publishing formats. Your iPad, your Android, your iPhone, your BlackBerry, Mac, everything else. So 2 megabyte file is not a 24 megabyte file. So there's a capacity aspect of it. Then there is this notion of performance. Grammys happen, the very next day Adele's song becomes a huge hit, and you got 1 million people pounding on it, trying to download it. So the question is, how do you really balance out performance and capacity without compromising on that? Right. So that's so with Intuit, it's not so much, yes, it is a compute side, but then it's all back ends into the amount of load you put on the storage subsystem. Right, where without getting into a lot of details, they use a Cassandra-based stuff at the back end, and they use Red Hat storage alongside with that. But it's more capacity challenge, and obviously high availability is definitely one piece of it, right? Which is if my primary server goes down, how quickly can I just store it or retrieve the files back from the secondary server? So it's a combination of HA and storage capacity and performance, at least with this application.
So I have a question for you, Jaspreet. You said about, so your company, so do you guys work on data protection? The fundamental change that you're saying that how storage is going to be defined, is it data protection or?
It's data protection for us, yes.
For you, you're also into the data protection area. And so do you think it is a valid point that how computation partitioning was happening? For example, they use heterogeneous data centers these days. You have a mixture of servers. Some are like the ARM CPUs and the others are the traditional x86. So depending on the kind of computation you are trying to do, they will schedule it on those kind of machines. So does it apply to data in the sense that the blocks of storage which are more used, like used more frequently, will be moved to SSD compared to the other blocks of data that is not being frequently used? they will move to the more secondary storages. Does that apply to storage also? I mean, these kind of concepts.
It does. It's very application specific use case, and it's probably a common answer to what Raghu also mentioned, that what we try to do is define a common namespace in some cases, where you may have a specific load, a specific kind of a load on a particular day, and the secondary load may change, and you can't tweak up or tweak down your network layer or CPU layer according to the same workloads. We try to define a single namespace for compute, for network, for storage, for identified information. For compute, the same change happened 10 years back when VMware came and said it's a common namespace. The load of a CPU, you would sort of combine or break up different CPUs to build a single guest OS. The same differentiation, same unification never happened for meta information network or storage, which is where likes of Gluster or Swift came in and tried to define a single namespace. So in certain cases, it's beneficial to build a hybrid workload environment where you may want to combine an actual storage like SSD or a normal slower disk to create a case where SSD fills in for a gap for memory and storage. But in majority of cloud users, it's not very, it doesn't work out very well. Because when you're defining a custom application, you are better off spreading the workload yourself rather than having a hybrid load, having a hybrid storage layer underlying it. When you're deploying a box, like a Nasira box or a Nimble box or those boxes, where you want to, you have a variance in workload and you don't want to hassle with how the workload gets managed in a single box, you may want to build a hybrid box. But for a cloud-specific use case, you're better off dividing the workload in multiple different layers and scale them separately. Because if you look at the 10-year trajectory, the compute, memory, network, and storage, they have not scaled linearly. They've scaled different dimensions. So you're better off making the distinction in the application rather than passing on the responsibility to the underlying layer.
So data tiering in the hardware layer is kind of last generation, and data tiering from a cloud application perspective is current generation and future.
True. In a SaaS, you can do it. In a SaaS, you can do it. The problem with the SaaS is you have to rewrite the application to build this distinction. Majority of applications need a basic acceleration from a normal block-based storage, which is where a hybrid environment is very, very useful, like a Nimble or any other solution of a flash-based or hybrid storage. But to get a better scale, better cost, better reliability, you're better off building, taking different building blocks and doing it. That's where you have a DynamoDB and a simple DB, a S3 and a reduced S3, and a EC2 and a different capacity model in AWS you can use separately. And the distinction in a cloud is beneficial to a SaaS provider, but for an on-prem standard application use case, a hybrid still makes sense.
Hi, the question is regarding your overall presentations of all of these different aspects of storage as a service. So if you go back to very fundamental software-defined infrastructure, which is a topic, so you have compute as a utility, you have storage as a utility, you have networking as a utility. So I want to understand that you mentioned, of course, some challenges and opportunities in the storage area, which is the subject of the today's discussion. But I want to understand the opportunities, meaning like what problem is not really being solved here. Very crisply, I want to understand, because it sounds like there's a lot of development already on the storage as a utility, but there's always customizations on the application side, on the capacity side, on the structuring or tiering of data side. But at the end of the day, you have providers who have all of these capabilities. So I'm trying to understand why one cannot use these capabilities and customize it on a per use basis without a lot of to-do about saying there's a lot of opportunities, like $30 to $40 billion worth of opportunities. Please help me out here about where are these opportunities.
I completely understand where you're coming from. And I have the same questions, by the way. The question you're asking is not like something look, the problem is there's a lot of hype out there, there's a lot of talk from different vendors, nothing actually really fully works, okay? And the fact of the matter is, networking, compute, and storage, from a software definition of how it needs to be used perspective, generically, that's not been done. I don't think any one of us can stand here and claim that, right? It just doesn't exist. maybe, by the way, I don't even think this is a technology issue. A lot of this is political. There's Cisco, there's Dell. Nobody wants to work with each other. There's a lack of a public definition, right? I mean, if something like that existed,
So what you're saying is that we're all at the forefront of a new generation.
maybe a lot of this is just somebody going out there and defining this. And stick to virtual, because what VMware does is it brings neutrality to the table. And as much as I hate VMware from a Dell perspective because it hurts my stock and all that, it brings neutrality to the table. A virtualization just kind of it takes that. Now we can have the performance argument, right? Doing things in hardware is faster, and I'm sure a lot of my Dell colleagues would kick me in the head for saying this, but yeah, maybe. But at the end of the day, moving to, I don't know who said that, it's 86, moving to a common architecture, bringing things in software, and taking these three tiers and just kind of formalizing it and standardizing it hasn't happened. It's part technology, it's part fighting with big companies. I think whoever's going to take this on is going to have more than a technology challenge or an IP challenge on their hands. Yeah, sure.
No, so one of the other things that's often overlooked, right, you talk about, it's not so much about what's the technology gap you're trying to fill. The other part of the equation is the buying cycle. I mean, so you go into a typical IT shop, right? You got the infrastructure guys, you got the app guys, and it's like oil and water. I mean, the guys, if you go tell one guy do it, the other guy says, no way on hell I'm going to do this, I'm going to do just the opposite. So as more of these things start to munch together, I think one of the biggest challenges vendors, including every one of us, is going to face is how do you really help reach consensus at the buyer, so that the app guy, the infrastructure guy, the storage guy, the networking guy, the virtualization guy, can all nod their heads and say, yep, I want to go. So I think technology challenge is one. The other thing is user buying. It's an untapped problem. How do you really go? So I don't know whether.
No, there are things like vendor lock-in, and IT guys want to work with Cisco, or it's you're tackling more of a red tape problem right now than it is of a hey. The best idea would be I can come up with an algorithm or some IP innovation that's going to just fundamentally change something, that how a router works or how. But this isn't that. This is more of a consortium. The last things you want to hear, it involves an agenda, bureaucracy, people. Honestly, I find it hard as an entrepreneur to just go in and say I'm in the SDS space because I'm going to solve, because it's a big problem.
I got to tell you the real funny story. Sorry about that. This was, I won't name the bank, but one of the largest banks, their offices down in the central part of the country, worldwide bank. So they called me and said, hey, all our storage guys are getting together. This is just purely storage guys. I walk into the room, 85 people. There are 85 decision makers for storage.
Try to sell to somebody like that.
And I kid you not, the moment, the first thing I put up was the hands are dead. And like 3 hands go this way, and they walk, they left the room. Because you're attacking their personal belief, their personal feelings. And those are the challenges more than anything else, right?
So I'll take a counter view on this, because I've been through the entrepreneurial path and relatively recent paths and going into exactly accounts like this, which have 85 decision makers. I think the way you kind of deal with that ball of spaghetti is really find a pain or a growth area which is so pressing. So, in Store Simple it was, we found that people just for the tier 2, tier 3 data in the enterprise, especially all this unstructured data, they just weren't able to kind of go ahead and meet their compliance, back up other requirements. So I said, well, instead of buying other stores, why don't you, for this little application, buy a storage system which has primary backup archive VR in one storage system integrated with the cloud. And that kind of, so it really comes down to how do you go ahead and create a very focused insertion use case. That is an example of what your broader vision is going to be as it kind of goes in. How you minimize the surface area from just a sales cycle friction perspective. And this goes into how well every interaction goes. From a sales meeting, you want a sales guy to come out of the first meeting knowing pretty well that whether there's a real deal over there or not.
right? We'd have our sales guys go in, do less than a 10-slide presentation, do a demo right over there. And then we train them to ask, see, what are you seeing constructive questions or but, when you're answering them. And if yes, then, well, okay, get the device in, have less than a 24-hour, put out POCs only for a week. And then if it is happening, be very clear about these are the use cases you'll go after, these are the, cloud, we want to do backup in the cloud. Walk away from there because no large enterprise who has a petabyte of data can practically recover a petabyte of data from the cloud. So just walk away from that. So so there is a way to be able to go ahead and craft this. And that is kind of where I think entrepreneurs really thrive, and the good entrepreneurs are able to go ahead. And because you can see there is the opportunity, there is this whole political morass, there is this, but then, there's SaaS, there's mobile, there's all this rich media, there's big data. There's just so many trends that are all coming together out of that end that, there's cold storage, right? Nobody wants to delete data, and, Amazon has a 1 cent a gig a month, but no enterprise has those economics. And they were happy to kind of, if you had a storage system for that, they'd absolutely get it, right? A specific business matching Amazon Glacier economics for an enterprise storage system. So there is, I think, it's just a phenomenal level of opportunity that is out there. And as I said, right, these are hard problems to solve because they are not always all technology problems. There is people, dynamics, and how you kind of work through that. But I've never been more excited about the opportunities that exist in this segment.
Yeah, I completely agree with what he said. I mean, look, I think that if you're gonna, as an entrepreneur, always focus on a specific use case. Just go in and say, hey, the best thing is you go to a customer and say, what is your specific problem? You got a headache? I have aspirin. That's the best thing. You don't want to sell a generic vitamin because nobody knows what vitamin A really does. But you know what an aspirin does. But but don't get into this by saying I'm going to solve the SDS or software-defined problem and just put a big banner because your customers aren't going to understand what it means or they're not going to know. You can fall under that umbrella, but go with a very specific. And by the way, as much as you can, avoid selling hardware. If you can do it in software, cowardly.
I'll disagree with that as well. So, we had a competitor that happened, and we had a couple of competitors. Now, we ended up having a great, fabulous exit out of that, but there are times and places where if you're in the infrastructure business, somebody wants to write a check and have a problem solved. And, at a certain point, if people want infrastructure and want to pay you for it, there's no reason. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. So I've had my last 7-8 years where it was all sort of value was all in software, but people would not pay $1,000 a node for software, but they'd pay, if you took that same software, put it on hardware, gave it to an integrated support, and then as a service model, they'd pay $7,000, $8,000 for it.
Yeah, just one small point to it. Just a full circle from an entrepreneur's view. Problem and opportunity are the same thing. They're not different. They're just two parts of the same coin. So Dhruva stood initially 5-6 years back for disaster recovery. We actually built a company for high-end server application across data centers. That actually never worked. So we spent 1 year solving a problem where CIA would not let us in a data center sale. So we had to find a relevant use case where if those 86 people in a room have a fire burning in data center, they would not ask, what brand of water do you have? They just say, put it in, we'll see how to pay you later. So we had to find a burning use case where they would let us in a mid to large sale. For us, that use case was endpoints. We took up a alternate approach saying if data center doesn't work, there's plenty of data outside data center, we'll try to cover that. So we became the Veritas of the edge. So, and that's precisely to the point. And then we moved to the software layer, the cloud layer, and recently announced a hardware as well. So then we came full circle. Now we have 38 salespeople, plenty of money in the bank, and now we can do all those things big companies does to reach the same full circle. So wherever you find a problem, there's also an opportunity for an entrepreneur.
So last question, more. Is SCSI still going to live? It's a small computer system, like no longer a small computer.
Hey, why are you looking at me? Tape still lives. Does that answer your question? Oh, seriously, people still like tape.
No, in 64-bit computing, you can address everything.
I didn't get that.
Whole data state. Why SCSI still?
I think that, I think the answer to, will SCSI still exist? I think if you look in the protocol stack for network storage, and you talk to those who are running, maybe SAN over the network, right? SCSI is still there. They'll be around for a long time, and if you're an engineer working in SCSI, I'd say maybe it's time to look for migration into the cloud and maybe into HTTP and what's happening there, and get up in that stack. Because that's where it's going. My prediction is that network attached storage as NAS and SAN will evolve into more of a real network, higher level protocol stack that obsoletes that technology in the next 10 years, more than likely. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Very innovative discussion. Thank you.
So I'd like to have all of you give a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your Tom, thank you very much for moderating this panel, and the panelists for sharing your deep, valuable insights and perspectives on this exciting software-defined infrastructure and software-defined storage. We are really at a really great juncture where three major trends, big data, mobility, and software-defined infrastructure, are all coming together. And you all have an opportunity to craft that unique use case that can disrupt the market. Thank you all, the attendees for coming here and asking the really good insightful questions. We are planning to have quarterly software-defined infrastructure panels. Next one will be in the end of October or November. It will be in the software-defined network space. Hopefully some of you are still in that interested in that area. I would love to have you all come and join over here. Thank you all for coming, and thank you again to the panelists.
You.